It is 7:46 here on this Friday morning, and we do have Friday with the Fuzz here. I'll toss it over to Michael Green. We've got some special guests in the studio as well. So, Michael, take it away.
Thank you, Derek. Yes, in studio with me today, as most every Friday, Elgin's Chief of Police, Jeff Swoboda. Thanks for coming in, Jeff.
Thank you for having me.
And we also have two guests from the, I don't know if it's a domestic violence unit, but we have Vanessa and Lark. So, welcome to the two of you, and we'll get to you in probably just about 5 minutes or so.
Okay.
We had a couple things we want to talk about with Jeff first. Not that we're prioritizing, but kind of the big news in Elgin, right, was the incident that happened down at the water. What is it called? The Water Reclamation District. Yeah, Fox River. So, all of a sudden, started seeing some posts about, a hostage situation and a man with a gun, and I mean, it was all over the news. I think there were helicopters out there, and I've got friends texting me while I'm working that day, and like my first day in my new territory. I had no idea. I was completely oblivious, I was in Naperville in Aurora, so I had no idea what was going on, but it turns out, right, to be a pretty good ending to the story, which it could have been scary because there are a couple of different ways it could have gone. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that incident on Wednesday, and one of the things that most impressed me that I think you and I talked about earlier too was how the individual was subdued. And to me that just kind of spoke volumes to the way Elgin handles things. So if you could, I'll just leave it at that. Boom, here
yeah.
we go. Just around to you.
Yeah, there was a lot going on that day, but in a nutshell, shortly, probably I guess before noon, we got a call down there, and a call of a man with a gun, potential hostage situation, and officers responded and ultimately found someone down there brandishing a gun, and later turned out to be a starter pistol.
But
still,
how would you know?
You wouldn't know,
right?
But just to throw that out there first. But at first, yes, having a gun. There were family members nearby, and so now, following up with the story, we'll get kind of towards the end, I guess at the right time at the end. But so there's a woman there with him. Officers show up, start talking with him, trying to get him to obviously drop the gun and talk with us. Weren't very successful. It was out in if anybody had probably been down that way, not a lot of cover for officers, out in a general kind of a grassy area. So it was very difficult for officers to get close because you see someone with a handgun. Luckily, just that day, our SWAT team was training, and we had one of our normal training days, and they were all in the station. And so when the call came out, there was also some discussion originally when it happened because that property split between South Elgin and Elgin. And so our SWAT team picked up and went and got out there and assisted patrol, and we were able to utilize the BAT, the armored vehicle, and be able to get up very close with the individual. And as the gun was being waved around, one of the officers with a less lethal force, which is generally speaking a bean. It wasn't a beanbag, but so most people understand.
Or something,
yeah, most people understand. Right, was able to use that. It's called less lethal. We're able to discharge that and hit him. And,
it just hurts like mad.
Yes,
right?
yes, and was able to hit him and knock him down. And officers from a REACT team nearby were able to go and put hands on him and then be able to take him into custody. Fire department was standing by, and we're able to get him medical attention right away and off to the hospital. So it was a good ending to what could have been a very bad case. One of the things that I'm very proud of is that we train this kind of stuff all the time. I mean, people will drive by routinely and see, what's going on over there? Is the SWAT team out? And they'll see our armored vehicle. They'll see a number of officers over at the sports complex working on things. And these are the kind of instances where I said, we don't experience them every day, which is even more the reason why we need to train with them.
What's scary is it seems to be, not to cut you off, but they seem to almost be hitting closer and closer to home. I mean, there was the incident at the facility in Aurora, at the FAA facility, right? Mm-hmm. And then this, and then yesterday was Bartlett, where a guy had barricaded himself in, saying he had a bomb or made some comments about the place blowing up, and that turned out to be, a good ending. Again, a good ending, but
right,
less dangerous ending than what could have been. So it just when it's California or it's Connecticut or it's somewhere, it's like, oh, okay, wow, that's crazy. But when it's home, it's even more scary. So
yeah. these types of things happen, obviously less than, much less than 1% of the time. But when they do happen, you better be able to be prepared to respond. You better have the right equipment. You better have officers who are able to recognize all the dangers upon, approaching. There's also been many officers killed in the line of duty. Even, obviously every year it happens, and this year it's up. And officers being ambushed on their way to a call and being killed, and that's happening, all across the country routinely. So officers we spend a lot of time with that, with how do we approach, what do we do when we get there, what equipment do officers need to make sure that they're safe when they're responding, then also be able to provide the proper safety. So this is another great example of the BAT that we have, the armored vehicle. Without that, we have officers, hiding behind trees, crouching up into gullies in the ground, trying to find some type of, hide behind a squad car, which won't stop all rounds. So when we have a vehicle like this, we can get it up very close without any problems. We can drive it up right up to somebody. Officers can be talking from the comfort of the car and know that they're safe within there. And from there, an officer was able to open up one of the hatches and deploy a less lethal round and end it immediately. And so, again, just we had a very large debriefing afterwards, which everyone who was there, and we always talk about what can we have done better, how was communication, what equipment is needed, and we go through all those things.
What's that? Able to share any of those things from the debriefing? Anything that you felt maybe you could have done better?
Some of the things, it's always communication. Always communication between the officers who are nearby, and then the SWAT officers. They show up. Many times they need their own radio channel so that they can talk about the things they need as they're getting set up, where officers won't have that.
But when they're on the other channel, then the other officers don't know what they're... Yeah.
And our commander of the SWAT team, Jim Lally, does a great job with that. He's the one who kind of plays the part. He's listening to both radios and explaining what he needs to explain. And we get through it, but it's always one of those things that we can maybe do it quicker or faster. Or some of the terms that SWAT uses, making sure that every officer understands the terms, that when something's going to be deployed. And so there's just a lot of that type of stuff. But, technically speaking, it was a textbook. When I showed up, Sheriff Perez was out there as well, and Chief Merritt from South Elgin. And it was actually very nice. All of our departments worked very well together, as we always do. Everyone assisted. And one of the county guys was there early on and saw that Elgin was there first and kind of handling it, and said, "Man, your guys are squared away." I mean, the way they pulled up, the way the first officers were negotiating with them, and then the way the SWAT team came in and handled it. And I said, "Thank you," but I'm just not surprised. That's why we train. That's why we invest the money. It's why we invest the resources, because when things go really bad or we need help like that really quick, you can't.
Without sounding arrogant, you were like, "Yeah, I know."
It was. I mean, it was. I said, "Thank you," but. You're right. I'm right on with him.
Yeah.
I told the entire SWAT team.
I know how to say this politically.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. So, we do things all the time. We talk about it on the show, and sometimes people mess up, or we as a department mess up, and so we own that. But we also own it when we do it right. And so this was a nice job by everybody involved.
There was one other quick incident that I want to talk about, just because it kind of hits close to home, and we also have some people here that might be able to talk about something generally, kind of the same, and that's crimes against children. As a father of two, anytime I hear or see anything like this, I mean, it's the hardest thing to report on. It's the hardest thing to talk about without welling up or getting that frog in your throat. Right. I just don't get it. Right. And this was an Elgin man that evidently lured 3 children into his home with the promise of a soda pop or a drink. Yeah. And the kids were able to get away. Mother reported it, and then a week later, or less than a week later, you have an arrest made. Without going into that, because I know, again, it's an active case, can you just talk about, some of the dangers, or even just some of the emotional state that the officers might be in when they go into a call like this?
Yeah, a few things. First of all, it's the delay was from the kids, but they eventually did tell their parents, and then once they brought it to the police department, then we acted on it very quickly.
It took a week.
Right. Yeah. And so a big part of it is just always reminding kids it's not their fault when anything happens or somebody puts them in a tough spot. To come forward, tell an adult, tell their parent, because they feel they're going to be in trouble. I remember one time I got hit by a car, and I ran home and hid, and I didn't want to tell anybody because I thought I was in trouble.
Right.
And
you did something wrong to get hit.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in trouble. I just got hit by a car. And so it's those kind of things. So I totally get when, kids are very scared to tell when they've done absolutely nothing wrong. So the big thing is making sure you tell somebody, get us involved early and quickly, and then on the other side of it with officers investigating, Yeah, this is one of the types of calls, but any types of suicides or officers see a lot of bad things. And again, we're not talking about this one because this one ended with the kids being able to all leave the house, and then we were able to make an arrest. But any homicide scene leaves a mark on an officer's. Any suicides, abductions, sexual assaults, all those types of things.
And I think you've said over the years, anything that's kind of related domestic-wise, or takes place inside of a home, with family or people that know each other so well, it's more heated. It's just everything's turned up.
Right. People want us there to help, but then it only goes so far. And then once you're about to take mom or dad away, wait, we wanted you here to basically tell the husband or wife that I'm right, but you're not about to take because then it starts thinking, wow, if he's arrested tonight, he's not going to work tomorrow. If he's not going to work tomorrow, he might lose his job. And then
he loses his
those
job,
types of things. Exactly. All of it starts playing, and that's why we have our guests here today, because coming into Domestic Violence Awareness Month, it's something that we can never probably talk too much about. Not just domestic violence, but all the things that happen in a family dynamic where sometimes people need help, but they don't always know how to get help. And then there's a stigma attached to it. So they think, well, if I ask for help, are my neighbor's going to find out? Is my work going to find out? So
and that's the thing, too. I mean, like anytime I know Lark and Vanessa, welcome. Thank you for coming in. Anytime it's... I don't know, it's that whole gapers thing, anytime a police officer is called into my neighborhood, or there's a police car on my street, it's like, what's going on? You're kind of peeking out the front window, and it probably leads to some of that where you may not want to call because you don't want that stigma attached to the police came out to your house, and what was it there for? And then, word gets out, and information becomes public, and now it's in the paper and on the radio, and so... Can you talk about some of with it being Domestic Violence Awareness Month, some of the dangers in that kind of thinking, or just in general with domestic violence? I mean, it's prevalent and probably very underreported.
Well, it is very underreported, but the statistics show that just from the nationwide police reports alone, that 1 out of 4 women are going to probably be victims of domestic violence sometimes in their lifetime.
And in that case, how is domestic violence defined?
Domestic violence is defined in terms of both partner abuse and any other kind of intimate abuse, sibling abuse, mother-child, father-child.
It doesn't have to be like striking someone either, does it?
No, actually, it doesn't. It can be emotional abuse, verbal abuse, but the probable cause for arrest probably won't happen unless it's physical abuse, and probably no court would do anything about emotional abuse. Which is somewhat understandable because, everybody would probably be in jail at some point
right.
for emotional abuse, because all of us can lose our tongues every now and then. But
I know I've said things that 5 minutes later I've regretted.
Yeah, right. So, but yeah, it's a whole gamut of family violence, but it's also just anybody living under the same roof, like roommate violence. And you also need to understand, too, that it can be ex-partner abuse, which would also be considered domestic violence. So anybody who's had an intimate relationship can be considered domestic violence.
I heard a statistic, and you helped me with it earlier, and I said, I'd heard a stat that I thought was very interesting, and that was that it takes, and you came up with a number, I couldn't recall that, 7 times for somebody to try to leave to actually leave.
Right.
Well,
there are many, many reasons for that. It's all the same reasons why victims choose to stay in the relationship. First of all, you have to remember that nobody falls in love with an abuser. They fall in love with Prince or Princess Charming. Okay? And it's not until they get to that milestone in the relationship where they belong to each other and nobody else that the tension building phase begins, the emotional and verbal abuse.
Which is why I tell my friends who say, I lived with her for 4 years before we got married. And I said, well, just wait till you get married. It just changes everything.
Yeah.
Because now you're, like you said, right?
Yeah.
That's that you're together. There's no...
It doesn't necessarily mean marriage. It can just mean moving in together or getting engaged or whatever. But it's that milestone that says, you're mine now.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that, because there's a lot of pre-calculated manipulation going on even in the courtship phase. It's the whole idea of winning somebody over, and I'm always telling victims to avoid getting into this trap. Let's see if we can identify, were there any red flags during the courtship phase, so that you don't end up meeting somebody else who does this to you again. And the red flags are usually excessive attention, excessive doting. It feels too much like a Hollywood romance. and the abuser says he loves her way too soon in the relationship before he even really knows her, pushing for a commitment. But it feels so good because there's so much flattery involved, there's so much gift giving,
So much
and
attention
so
you're
much
getting, it
donating,
just feels great.
you know, who isn't a sucker for that? Especially if you're not feeling too good about yourself right now and you're in a vulnerable time in your life. It just feels great to have somebody say you're so special, or you're a god or a goddess or whatever. It feels great, right? So it's hard to resist. They're so charming, and they can be a lot of fun to be with, you know. And so it's, but to notice those red flags. If it doesn't feel natural, if it doesn't feel like the timing's right for things, this person could very well be a controller, a manipulator, and eventually an abuser, you know.
And I think statistically, more men are abusers, but not always the case either.
Not
right?
always the case. 85% of victims are women, but there is that small percentage that are men. But what I find interesting, because
And that's probably even more underreported than the women, right?
oh yeah, probably more stigma there, because how can you let the little lady beat you up kind of attitude, you know?
Or beat you mentally.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And but we work with both. I've worked with both female and male victims. And what's so interesting to me, over the years, I've been doing this for about 12 years now, what's so interesting to me is that I notice the patterns both on the victim side of it and the offender side of it. And on the victim side, whether they're male or female, it's the same kind of psychological torture, if you will, and it's the same kind of reasons for staying in the relationship. It's that I don't want to deprive the children of their mother or father. I have, you know, don't have enough finances to support the family on my own. I have no place to go. I have no family or friends who will help me. Or if I do, I don't want to involve them because the abuser is threatening them too. There's also a lot of stalking and domestic violence, so there really is no way that we can keep them safe unless they have a hired bodyguard.
Yeah.
It's really, because it can be a very excessive fatal attraction kind of thing going on. And so it takes a lot of courage to leave. It really does. And if it's going to escalate to homicide, that's probably when it will happen. And so you can get your order of protection, which you should, because 80% of abusers respect it. They don't want to end up in jail. And that's probably the only deterrent, really, right there. 20% don't, and they're particularly dangerous. And that's when you really have to make sure you have a good safety plan and you have a lot of support from the community. The worst you can do is stay in isolation. The best you can do is have as many people watching over their shoulder for you as you possibly can. So staying safe is like the biggest priority for us when we work with victims. And after that, once we are sure that they are safe, we tend to work with them to recover from the psychological damage that was done from the trauma. A lot of them have post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety that is crippling, because it's just like being a war vet. You know, you can, once you've experienced so much trauma, and the children experience trauma just from witnessing it, even if they weren't directly abused, and they can't function well in school and everything because of it. So there's just so much impact, not only to the family itself, but to everybody who knows them, and kids in school might sometimes be getting bullied by a kid who is being bullied at home, or watching his mom get bullied or his dad get bullied, and they bring it to school and all their frustration and anger. And so,
What type of resources does the city of Elgin have at their disposal for a victim?
yeah.
In different stages, I guess. You know,
Okay.
what kind of things are out there, and how can someone contact you if they want?
Well, they can contact us directly. We have we're on the police website, okay? And our phone number is 847-289-2644, and that's the direct line to get either Vanessa or me. Vanessa's out there on days that I'm not, and I'm there on days she's not. Sometimes we're together if we have to meet.
Yeah.
You know? But there's always going to be somebody there during the day, usually in the evening, to answer calls. But the best thing to do, though, is to call the police first and make sure that they intervene and get a police report taken. That gives you a little bit more leverage to get an order of protection when you need one. And then we will call you. I mean, we review every single police report and call the victims and offer services, our own counselor services. I'm a licensed counselor, and we're both case managers that will help them through the process, get an order of protection, or get resources from the community that They might need an addition to ours, like the Community Crisis Center, where they can get emergency shelter for free. What they need to know is all these services are free. It doesn't cost them anything. And one of the reasons why it's free is because we're funded by the Victims of Crime Act grant. And so we're paid by that, and they don't have to worry about it. They don't have to worry about insurance or anything.
And the biggest thing, again, you said, is just kind of that first step, get the police involved.
Right.
And then you guys review all of the reports?
We try to review every single one of them, the domestic battery, the domestic disturbance. We try to get to all of them.
And if you see your
sometimes we get
services are
behind,
needed,
but
then you go, you
Yeah.
step in. Yeah.
Right, we do. I will say sometimes it's hard to know who the primary aggressor is, though,
Right.
because sometimes it looks like mutual combat, and the police have a hard judgment call to make. And you have a legal right to self-defense. However, you're going to have to prove that it was self-defense, especially if you've injured the other party. And that could be a tough one. That could be a real tough one.
I imagine it's even tough, Jeff, showing up at a location where there's a call in place, and the officer's got to determine, as Lark was saying, who the aggressor was here. Who do you charge? Do you charge anybody? I mean, that's a tough call too, right?
That is the hard one, and police officers are mandated to make an arrest if there are signs that abuse has taken place. There are physical signs that some type of battery has occurred, and so officers are mandated to make an arrest. But figuring that out, if both combatants have scratch marks, that's why it helps also to look at what's happened in the past, previous police reports. We write police reports that even when there's not, and
easier now that you have your computer system up. Right?
Be able to look back at old reports, talking to witnesses, talking to anybody else that was walking by or may have some information. But yeah, it's very difficult, and I think the big part of why these ladies are so important in their entire unit, because officers are going call to call many times, and so we show up, we find out, we want to make people safe at that moment and see if somebody can get a ride, if somebody needs to be arrested, where we're at. But many times we walk away and leave them both there, back in the home. And so the follow-up is so crucial, because at that moment maybe somebody doesn't want to talk, but maybe the next morning when they're thinking about it a little bit more.
Or they want to talk, but maybe just not in front of the abuser
Exactly.
or the other party, right?
Right. And so it is. It's a very difficult thing. Things that happen behind people's closed doors at home, you never really know the whole story. And so there's years and years of issues potentially that have built up to that one moment, and we're there for 20 minutes trying to figure it out. And that's nearly impossible, obviously.
Yeah.
So having the follow-up is so important. But the key is just that if anyone's listening, they know somebody who's abused, they themselves are abused, or not sure if they're abused. Is this is what's going on right or wrong? Give us a call, and they can work you through it. I mean, that's what we're here for, is to help people in need, and we can help them in many ways. Cost them nothing. Confidentiality is completely there, and I think we gave the number once, but if you want to give the number maybe one more time for anybody.
847-289-2644, and that's the direct line to either Vanessa or myself, Lark. Vanessa, you want to say something?
She's like, no, you said it perfectly.
They work as a team, and public want to say thank you to them, and there's a lot of groups that are out there. They work closely. The crisis center is out there, and the community is very giving with information and help with the police department, and we wouldn't be successful without all the help that we're given from the community. And in many ways, it's just in the form of information. So helping us help people many times before it gets too bad. And we all see the stories in the papers when something's gone way too far, and then people come forward and say, we knew that was going on for years. She's been talking how, or he's been talking how he's been abused. And if you know somebody who's having that going on, give us a call, and we can do some follow-up. And you can only help someone, obviously, if they want the help. But
you read of these tragedies all the time, and you think, you say it all the time, when somebody commits a crime, it's probably not their first time. Very rarely. So when you hear abuse or you see abuse, don't turn a blind eye. It's probably not the first time that they've done it. They may be in need of help.
Mm-hmm. And then the cyclical portion, we can talk quickly just about how when the kids see it. I mean, that's why this continues to go on, because kids learn how to behave many times from their parents.
Oh yeah, it's like they all go to the same abuse school.
Yeah.
We can actually predict what the abuser's going to do, because they all use the power and control tricks, the same ones. And but the main one that they use is isolation. Little by little, they chip away at your other relationships, convince you to stay away from your family, stay away from your friends. And so they operate a lot like cult leaders, where they just want to get full control of you, including your mind. So, I mean, by the time you are seeing a victim, You know, they may not be able to think very clearly. They're under so much, you know, power and influence of
Yeah.
the
I guess I could add to that is they're so successful because of the silence. When you break the silence, it often can break that cycle. So the key is to speak up, become empowered, and try to do something about it.
And being empowered means break that isolation.
Yeah.
The more people who know, the more people watching your back, the less he can have power over you, or she, for that matter.
Right.
Right.
Guys, I want to thank you very much. Jeff, thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having
Mark,
me.
Vanessa.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Again, 847-289-2644 is the telephone number, or you can get the police involved, 847-289-2700. The main number, 911. If it's a 911 situation, please don't hesitate. Text 411, Elgin PD at the beginning. Any of those are great methods to get the information out there. So,
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
thank you guys.
Thanks.
Ladies, have a great day.
You too.
You listen to AM 1410, WRMN.
And Elgin.